are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Join with me, as always, is Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man. So the last few days in the NBA offseason has been absolute madness, to say the least.
Yeah, especially like after we made our last video, it just went even more insane, to be honest.
Speaking of the last episode, if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. For audio listeners, you know where to find us on all the podcasting platforms. For YouTubers, YouTube people, it's up there somewhere or in the description. So definitely check it out if you haven't done so. We basically broke down most of the trades that took place leading up to the NBA draft and leading up to free agency. But we did give you guys the disclaimer in that episode saying that, you know, probably by when that episode came out, there'd be a ton more news to talk about.
Yeah, I mean that's what the NBA season is, especially now at this point with all the CBA, how the CBA is structured and how like player movement is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's completely crazy now.
I mean, it's also like the fact that how condensed this free agency has been. You know, it's just like the fact that the moratorium period was 2 days and everything had to happen basically in this 1 week because training camps start next week. So teams were just scrambling to make moves. But so the good news is for us, we have a ton to talk about. There's just a ton of movement in the league. Despite being a very weak free agency, there was a lot going on. I think there's a lot of movement, some decent signings. Some teams have improved significantly. Some teams taken some steps back. Which is exactly what we're going to cover in this episode.
And some teams just didn't do anything.
Yeah,
which is fine.
Which is fine. I mean, it's not great for us, but, you know, it's cool. But yeah, basically in this episode, we're going to be breaking down the winners and losers of the 2020 offseason. Now, obviously, this is very subjective to our own opinion, what we think, but definitely let us know if you disagree or disagree with what we say. So starting off with the winners of this offseason, I think it'd be a crime if we didn't put them as a winner. And it's the obvious winner of this offseason had to be the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, they won the NBA title, and, you know, you wouldn't think a team who just won an NBA title can make as many moves as they did to improve, but...
I was actually talking to Hani about this before we started the episode. Now we know who was really dragging down the Lakers, and it was Magic Johnson, because clearly Rob Pelinka knows what he's doing.
I mean, Rob Pelinka done a great job, and I did not see this coming.
I mean, he earned Kobe's vote of confidence, so that's worth something. But then we saw what he did last offseason in the time that he had after Magic stepped down. And we're like, okay, you know, he pulled off a bunch of good trades with a minimal window opportunity.
And after the whole Kawhi fiasco.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, yo, he did a pretty solid job. And then we move on to this offseason, and this guy's clearly established himself as one of, you know, the upper tier executives.
He's a very good executive. And it's like, just like, speaking of the additions he made this offseason, the first one, we talked about this in last week's episode, but the first acquisition was the trade for Dennis Schroeder. They didn't really have to give up much of anything to acquire a player that gives them immediate improvement. 18
points a game, around 4 assists.
Floor spacer, can handle the ball. Again, we talked about it in the last episode, but it was a really great trade for the Lakers. Second of all, they acquired a bunch of free agents. So the first one is Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol was signed to a minimum deal. Now, again, Marc Gasol is not the same player he used to be. But again, as Raptor fans, we know the value he brings on the court is beyond the spreadsheet. The stat sheet. So, you know, Marc is just a solid defensive player, great playmaker. And for a Lakers team that has LeBron and AD, just having a big as steady as Marc Gasol.
Yeah, he's still one of the best defensive bigs in the game, despite his, you know, lack of speed. But you don't need that when you have a defensive player of the year candidate in Anthony Davis.
It's IQ. Marc Gasol has probably one of the best basketball IQ in the league, and pairing that with again a defensive player of the year caliber player in Anthony Davis.
And then on the flip side, on the offensive side, quickly, you know, he at this stage in his career is going to be a floor spacer for one. Though, again, if he can hit his shots, which is, after last postseason, it's a big if.
I mean, I was concerned if he can make his layups now.
I mean, that's a done deal. That's not happening anymore. It's threes. So he's going to have to hit threes alongside, especially AD and LeBron. But then the main thing, his role on the offensive end for the Lakers is his high post offense. It's passing. Still one of the best big men passers in the game by far.
Pairing that with LeBron.
Yeah, pairing that with LeBron. We saw what LeBron and Rondo did from, the high post area and their entry passes, their passes to cutters, KCP. Kuzma, I think, really benefited in that respect. The one thing I can say about Kuzma was that I was impressed with him, in the very least, as a cutter this year. Even if nothing else that much impressed me about his game, I would say his cutting definitely improved, and that's thanks to guys like LeBron and Rondo. And then obviously you have AD on the block, Marc Gasol, the high-low entries, the lob passes to AD. It's going to be a fun offense to watch for sure.
Yeah. Marc Gasol was definitely a good addition. The big surprising addition for the Lakers was Montrezl Harrell.
Yeah.
Spurning the Clippers and signing a 2-year, $19 million deal with the Lakers.
Is this the most surprising offseason move for you? I would say
in recent time, I'd say yes.
No, like this offseason.
Oh, in this offseason, yeah, definitely for sure. I just think it's that or the Chris Paul trade to Phoenix, because like at this point,
I mean the Chris Paul thing,
I didn't think he was gonna go to Phoenix. That was
we didn't expect it to happen, but we could see maybe an idea of it coming. I don't think anybody thought Montrezl Harrell was gonna go to the Lakers for pretty much the mid level.
I mean, the rumors were like he was gonna go to Charlotte to get a payday. Or like he was gonna go to like the Knicks,
$17 million a year,
a team with like cap space, but no one or he would have just re-signed for the mid level with the Clippers. No one expected this guy to go, let alone
across the hall
to the Lakers for the mid level. It's insane. Like this is an extremely affordable deal for the Lakers.
Like this guy kind of killed his value in the postseason. Clearly, his value in the offseason was not that high. At least not as high as we expected it to be.
Well, clearly not. But, I mean, there definitely should have been suitors. I just don't know. Maybe he valued winning a little bit more. I think, at least that's our assumption.
I think, if I remember correctly, he had more money from Charlotte on the table. But he decided to go to the Lakers because he wanted winning. Yeah. But again, I know, he obviously decreased his value a lot in postseason. But again, personal reasons, number one.
Yeah.
So again, justified. But at the end of the day, this guy still won $6 Man of the Year. And it's not like you're asking him to go crazy on the Lakers, bro. This guy's literally going to be he'll probably be the backup center, I would think. Right? And he doesn't need to go crazy. And then he can literally retain his role that he had with Lou Will, because he has Dennis Schroeder now alongside him.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great pickup for the Lakers. But here's another thing that I didn't actually realize until on my drive here when I was listening in to a podcast. But basically, Montrezl Harrell, his one defensive liability is that he's not a rim protector. He's a center, but not a rim protector. But the Clippers didn't have any bigs or anybody to cover up that defensive liability. Well, now you have Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis may not like to play center, but any of those undersized power forwards can, good luck posting up Montrezl Harrell. And then if you get to the rim, well, Anthony Davis is right there.
And again, Montrezl's defensive liabilities are more a cause of his height, right? His size. Not necessarily his motor. Because we've seen, when he's engaged on the defensive end, which he is a lot of the time because he's a high-energy guy, he can block shots. He can, try to protect the rim. The main thing is he's just not as big as other big men, right? So you, at the very least, that he won't just stink it up on defense.
And we've already seen as an energizer player off the bench how effective he is. And for a team like the Lakers that, when you don't have LeBron on the court, you want some energizers off your bench, which is perfect for
and now they might have the best bench in the league.
Yeah,
alongside one of the best starting lineups in the league.
Yeah, it's crazy. The last free agent signing that they made was signing Wesley Matthews to a 1-year, $3.6 million deal.
That was a good pickup,
dude. So it was in our offseason outlook, I believe, for the Bucks, where we talked about Wesley Matthews. We said that hey, he was gonna opt out and go to can go to any contender and be effective. So here he is with the Lakers, man. And it kind of sucks, man, that he went to the Lakers, but holy, that's a really good
For
pickup.
$3.6 million. That's it.
Yeah.
And then finally they re-signed Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, which I thought was a big one because I didn't know if they were going to be able to re-sign him.
And it was a good contract,
Yeah,
too.
they re-signed him on a 3-year, $40 million deal, and then they re-signed Markieff Morris on a minimum deal, and he apparently spurned the Clippers to come back to the Lakers. So that's cool. In terms of losses, obviously, they had Avery Bradley who went to Miami. I think it's not as big of a loss because they literally played the whole postseason.
I mean, they won without him.
Yeah,
they
won without him.
No offense to Avery Bradley, but you weren't there.
And then JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard were shipped off pretty much because they re-signed with the Lakers.
Well, Dwight Howard was the interesting one. Like, JaVale was traded after the Marc Gasol
JaVale picked up his player option, but then the Lakers needed space for Marc Gasol, so they traded him to Cleveland. Dwight Howard was an interesting one because of the fact that he announced that he was going to re-sign. But clearly what happened was that the Lakers had a offer for him. But then I guess they ended up getting Montrezl Harrell and then they pulled the offer. So I kind of feel bad for Dwight Howard in that sense. Yeah. But so Dwight Howard ended up going to the Sixers. And then finally Rajon Rondo, we knew he wanted to at least get a bigger payday.
But that's what makes the Dennis Schroeder trade a great one because what a good contingency in case Rondo decided to leave, which he did.
Exactly. And it's not like you still have your primary ball handler on the team is still going to be LeBron either way.
Yeah.
Right? So now you have Dennis Schroeder to help out and, pick up where Rajon Rondo left off.
Yeah.
Not in the same role, but, they can do a lot of the same things. And Dennis Schroeder is definitely a better option on the, scoring side of things.
Yeah. I mean, overall, this was a great offseason for the Lakers. They essentially filled every hole on their roster, and they improved at every single position. Like, I looked at their depth chart, which we were referring to. They have so much depth, man. Like, they have a great starting five of LeBron. So, sorry, it would be, Schroeder.
I don't know if Schroeder would start for them. I think it would be probably LeBron, KCP. I would think
Wes Matthews,
yeah. AD and Mark.
And Gasol, yeah. And then off the bench you have
Schroeder, Harrell,
yeah,
Kuzma still. Kuzma. Hopefully he can improve. That's a big one this year.
I still say to trade him. I'm just saying.
He might get.
traded. You said Kuzma's good at cutting. You know who else is good at cutting? LeBron, good at cutting players. Look, man, the GM.
Shout out to Smooth.
Just saying. But yeah, no, the Lakers have so much depth now, and honestly, at this point in time, they are. I guess I'm gonna say it. They're clearly the title the favorites to repeat as champions.
Yeah.
As of right now, but yeah, great offseason. Credit to Rob Pelinka, man. I did not see this type of offseason coming from the Lakers, especially after winning the title. So the first winner of the offseason, obviously the Los Angeles Lakers. The second winner of the offseason, I believe this is a bit of a shocker, the Atlanta Hawks. So the Hawks were one of those teams coming into this offseason with a ton of cap space, a lot of draft capital, and they have a lot of young talent on their team, but it was time for them to take that next step. Now, obviously, I thought they were going to take that step last season. I was clearly wrong about that one. But hopefully...
Shout out John Collins for that suspension.
Just ruined everything for me. But the Hawks made a lot of solid additions in this offseason. The first one was signing Rajon Rondo to a 2-year, $15 million contract. Again, you're picking up a veteran point guard to mentor Trae Young. It's a little bit on the pricier side of things as far as a veteran point guard.
You're only locked in for 2 years. I don't know if the second year is an option or not. But, you have a backup ball handler on the team. As you said, you have a mentor for Trae Young.
Especially because Jeff Teague also left in free agency.
Yeah.
So Rondo was a solid pickup for them. The second one, this was kind of a bit of it was kind of a shocker that they even were able to acquire him. It's Bogdan Bogdanović. He was a restricted free agent with the Kings. Now, apparently, he was going to go to the Bucks in a sign-and trade that got botched because apparently,
the Bucks did a sign and trade with the Kings for Bogdan Bogdanović, but he didn't want to go to the Bucks and he nixed the deal. Yeah. And then even worse for the Bucks now, the NBA's investigating them because technically it's tampering.
Yeah, it's technically tampering. So but then Bogdan signed an offer sheet with the Hawks and the Kings decided not to match. So Bogdan Bogdanović is now an Atlanta Hawk. So another great pickup. We've talked about him being a solid young player, shooter, a guy who can shoot, spread the floor, can handle the ball, create. Great young player to add to Atlanta's, wealth of young talent. Another player is Danilo Gallinari. Now, we thought for sure he was going to be a Miami Heat because he was basically a Miami Heat
last
trade deadline. But he decided to go after, I think, longer term with the Hawks, go for a 3-year, $61 million deal.
I think Miami also realized they might not be able to pay him that much either, considering we'll talk about this later, but Bam Adebayo's deal that they had coming up to do, plus the fact that they want to be able to have cap space for next offseason, which currently now Miami has no cap space for next offseason, so they're probably going to have to like ship a bunch of players out besides, their two best players. But Danilo Gallinari, I think, was an interesting one because I don't think many people saw him going to the Atlanta Hawks. But again, you add another scorer, another veteran presence. They try to fill this team with a bunch of solid veteran players who can do different things on either side of the ball
and complement their young core.
Exactly. Talking about guys that can do on both ends. Tony Snell they signed. We talked about him in a couple of our offseason.
Well, Tony Snell was acquired via trade.
Yeah.
So they traded Dwayne Dedmon to the Pistons in exchange for Tony Snell. Essentially, there was some picks involved as well. But no, I mean, again, Tony Snell is another solid pickup, another floor spacer, guy who can play on both ends of the court. Honestly, we're kind of shocked that he didn't end up on a contender. I think that's my biggest shock, because I think a contending team would have looked at Tony Snell, his contract, and would have made a deal to acquire him. But the Hawks had the assets. I mean, you can say a lot of things about the Hawks, being a rebuilding franchise, but they had cap space and they had assets to produce an offseason like this. And I think they still have cap space even after all these moves, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, either way, they're just trying to get to that next step, and they've signed a bunch of guys, and acquired a bunch of guys who can help them get to that next step. Speaking of another signing, Chris Dunn on a 2-year, $10 million contract, and then Solomon Hill on a 1-year minimum contract. Chris Dunn, another guy, another guard who can play both guard positions, one of the best, defenders at the guard position in the league. Again, not exactly great at all the other stuff, but, in terms of what they're going to ask him to do, clearly Trae Young and Rajon Rondo are your first and second options on the depth chart for the point guard position. So Chris Dunn can be, your, for example, 18 to 20 minute guy game, get in there, provide some energy, get on his defensive assignments, disrupt plays and whatnot, and give you that, good spark off the bench. And then Solomon Hill is a good veteran presence on the end of the bench, a good emergency option if you need him, a 3-and-D kind of guy. But overall, man, like you look at Atlanta's depth chart, it's pretty like stacked in the sense that they don't have any like superstars aside from like Trae Young. Well, I wouldn't call Trae Young a superstar yet, but they don't have any like quote unquote stars. But like their roster is filled with very, very good talent from 1 to like 13, 1 to 12.
Like it's a lot of solid players. Like they're not like high end, like super high end talent, but they're all just great, solid talent. And I think together make a very good collective team.
Not to mention, you still have your young guys, DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish, Kevin Huerter, John Collins. And then they still haven't even played Clint Capella yet.
Yeah, Clint Capella's on this team.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they haven't even gone to see what Clint Capella can do for them either. So all of these, I think the one issue they might have is trying to mesh all of these players together, considering like the limited time frame that they have. But if they're able to get this going, and especially if Lloyd Pierce can get his act together, then we can see at the very least it'll be a really fun team to watch, a very fun team.
Yeah, maybe they won't botch my prediction this year. That episode is coming up. Stay tuned for that one. But no, speaking on your point about the fact that the good news is that the chemistry. The good news is most of these are veteran players, so meshing veteran players should be easier to do than meshing young players into a new system. But yeah, the Hawks did a fantastic job this offseason, and we'll look forward to seeing how they perform this season. Moving on to the next winner of the offseason, it has to be the Portland Trailblazers in our opinion. The Trailblazers, they didn't make the biggest moves, but I think the moves they made were very solid with the limited amount of money and assets that they had. The moves they made were solid to improve their team.
Clearly, the Trailblazers are not one of those teams that are gonna blow things up.
No.
They're one of those, they prefer being steady and solid if unspectacular, we can say,
Kind
rather
of like
than
the Raptors were.
rather than just trying to blow it up, which I can respect that.
Yeah, no.
Their first move, they acquired Robert Covington in the Trevor Ariza deal. Again,
One of the Trevor Ariza
one
deals.
of the initial Trevor Ariza deal. You add one of the best 3-and-D players in the league, arguably, like the premier guy at that position. We saw his, couple of his one season in Minnesota where he was at the top of like the defensive player of the year list. Last season when he went to Houston Rockets, we saw how great of a defender he is and how good of a shooter he is. So you add that now to Portland Trailblazers, a guy who they've been needing pretty much since like Mo Harkless left.
Yeah.
And Mo Harkless kind of occupied that position for them. But again, you're talking about Mo Harkless compared to Robert Covington. Robert Covington's way up there, man.
You can even argue since Nick Batum left, like when Nick Batum left.
Well, Nick Batum was more of that like Swiss Army knife. I would say if you want to go back to that team, it would probably be Wesley Matthews who occupied that.
Wesley Matthews would
probably be that role.
But yeah, we talked about it in last episode when we broke down the trade. Like Robert Covington is just a solid pickup. He's exactly the type of player the Blazers needed. He was a good pickup. Another move they made was to trade for Enes Kanter. Now, obviously, Hassan Whiteside is currently a free agent, so they are going to need another backup big.
They traded away Mario Hezonja pretty much. So those were their two losses of the offseason.
Trevor
minimal losses all around.
Yeah, but grabbing Enes Kanter is a solid pickup in my opinion. Now, Enes Kanter isn't going to bring you the defensive prowess that Hassan Whiteside can bring you when he actually tries.
Which he did try this year.
He did. It was a
contract year. Exactly.
But Enes Kanter, he's a solid veteran player. He knows the Portland system because he played there for a little bit.
Great locker room guy.
Good veteran, and again, solid big.
Well, I mean, offensively he's pretty good. It's just defensively he sucks.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Just again, he's a solid big. Overall good locker room guy. So I think it was also another good addition, especially potentially losing out on Hassan Whiteside, unless he resigns. Another move that they made was re-signing Rodney Hood. Now, we were actually talking about this when we did the offseason outlook for the Portland Trailblazers, was that how were they going to, how much is Rodney Hood going to command? They were able to get him at a nice number, a cheaper deal, because obviously he had suffered the injury and they didn't really know what to expect. Bro.
Like those injuries are killers, so it makes sense why he wouldn't be able to get that same value that he might have once thought he had.
But it's a short-term deal on a team-friendly contract, so I think for Portland it was a great move keeping a guy like that around. Another move that they made, pretty underrated by most people, but signing Harry Giles to a 1-year minimum deal.
This was very interesting to me because Harry Giles is still a young big man. And it's like, this guy couldn't have gone anything better than a 1-year minimum contract. Especially, bro, like, as a Raptors fan, I wanted to sign him. And the fact that he signed for a 1-year minimum, like, I don't know, bro. I understand Harry Giles' injury history, but
he's also a project, like, to most teams' eyes. So I think the incentive for a team like the Raptors to go after a guy like Harry Giles would be, hey, let's bring him into our system, our developmental system that's already proven, and let's see if we can make something out of him. So
but for Portland's perspective, I think similar to what you're saying about the Raptors, they have a good veteran core, they have a good system, they have a good culture, they have a good front office. Why not bring a guy like that in, a young guy, see what he can do, if he can prove himself, maybe retain him for the next year. Overall, it makes sense from Portland's side, but, Harry Giles, like, just getting a 1-year minimum was, I think, a bit surprising to me.
Yeah. Another addition that the Blazers made was signing Derrick Jones Jr. to a 2-year, $19 million deal. Again, another solid pickup. Derrick Jones Jr. is a solid defender. Getting better as an offensive player. We saw that with Miami this past season in the finals run. So Derrick Jones Jr. again, another solid pickup, another good rotational piece for their roster. Who doesn't cost that much. He costs literally the mid-level.
And is on the rise. We saw his improvement in Miami, especially as a defender. And then the last year we saw him this past season start to hit some more threes. So if he can, become that end of the bench guy, or even like maybe a 8-9 guy for the Portland Trailblazers who can do his role, proper signings.
Yeah, and finally, the last move was the Blazers re-signed Carmelo Anthony to a minimum deal. This is just more like a feel good one. Melo played really well for the Blazers, and it's nice to see him back and staying in the league.
I think it makes sense for him too, considering we saw that he was bouncing around from team to team, and in Portland he finally found a home. So it makes sense at this stage in his career why he'd want to retain that.
Yeah, I mean overall, I think the Blazers did an excellent job. This retooling their roster. They got some solid wing players like Rocco and Derrick Jones Jr. They got some solid bigs in the rotation, and they brought back Melo and Rodney Hood on cheap deals. And they didn't really lose anybody from their roster. So overall, they took what they had last season with Lillard and they added onto it, which should help them be a playoff team. Legitimately, instead of having to sneak through with a play-in tournament.
Well, again, they did sneak through because of the fact that they were completely injured last season. Hopefully, that doesn't happen this year.
Yeah.
But
they are better than last year, for
definitely.
sure. Definitely a better roster. So
they're hoping they can pretty much get back to that 2019, status that they had, I guess.
Yeah, as like the third seed, like a top seeded team in the Western Conference. Moving on into the last team that we feel is a winner of this offseason is the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, the Sixers had a tough job, as we mentioned in our offseason outlook for the Sixers. They had a tough job. So they had a bunch of bad contracts that they needed to move one of those or most of them. They also needed to retool the roster in order to fit the style of basketball that they need to play with surrounding Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. So obviously that was their agenda going into this offseason.
Well, especially when they got Daryl Morey, and now you see his impact.
Yeah.
Considering the moves they made were very Daryl Morey-esque.
Daryl Morey moves, man. Obviously we'll start off with the additions that they made. The first one is obviously acquiring Danny Green and Terrence Ferguson from the Thunder. We talked about this in last week's episode. Danny Green, again, if he's a solid veteran, he can play some defense for you. If he, can hit his shot, he can spread the floor for you ideally, which is the type of player the Sixers need right now. Veteran presence, championship experience. Again, solid pickup. It also allowed them to get rid of the big Al Horford contract, which was huge for the Sixers. That contract was not good.
I think even to 2 episodes, whenever we did the offseason outlook for the 76ers, we were debating on whether or not Daryl Morey would be able to get rid of the Al Horford contract. The fact they did it in such a such a successful manner in which he got back Danny Green and then Terrence Ferguson, a nice young player with some potential. That speaks to how good of a executive Daryl Morey is.
Yeah. Speaking of another Daryl Morey move, Daryl Morey acquired Seth Curry from the Dallas Mavericks. Now, he did have to trade away Josh Richardson in order to make this deal happen, but Seth Curry is a better floor spacer than Josh Richardson. He's a good spark off the bench. He's also, I think, on a cheaper deal than Josh Richardson right now.
Josh Richardson is on a expiring deal if he picks up his player option, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, it is a better fit from the point of view that now with Ben Simmons coming back, hopefully completely healthy, he's gonna be taking that guard role, that lead guard role. So it doesn't make as much sense for you to keep Josh Richardson, where you can get a guy like Seth Curry, who is a legitimate floor spacer, whereas Josh Richardson, he can shoot threes. He's a good 3-point shooter, but he does have those iffy games where maybe he doesn't shoot as well. Seth Curry is, easily one of the greatest, I think, 3-point shooters in NBA history already.
The only drop-off would be the fact that the defensive drop-off between Josh Richardson and Seth Curry. But what the fact is that the Sixers have guys like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and they have defensive players
that's why they also got like Danny Green.
Yeah, so
Terrence Ferguson.
They have guys, but most importantly, like I just looked up the contracts. They are saving about $3-4 million per year, and getting an extra year of Seth Curry versus Josh Richardson. So
while killing the Al Horford contract.
So that was definitely a solid move for the Sixers. They also brought in Tony Bradley. I believe this was a free agent signing.
No, it was a trade with he got traded he kind of bounced around. I think he ended up, it was a trade with the Detroit Pistons, if I'm not mistaken, where the Sixers acquired Tony Bradley, and the Sixers sent out Zaire Smith, their third year player, to the
Second year player, I think.
to the Detroit Pistons. So overall, they got another big man, and their main big man, which they got in free agency, as we touched upon it, is Dwight Howard to back up Joel Embiid. Obviously, in the Knicks, in the kind of weird LA situation, the Montrezl Harrell situation. So now they got two big men who can back up Dwight Howard. I was talking about it in our 76ers outlook. They also have Norvel Pell, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with him, because I think he's also a quality bench player, a young player. So now they have a couple of good big men to back up Joel Embiid, especially considering the fact that, Joel Embiid does have an injury history, and, if he does miss some games now, you have some solid options out there to back him up.
Yeah, I mean, overall, if we're looking at the Sixers, we did mention the three main losses: Al Horford, Josh Richardson, Zaire Smith. The big things for the Sixers that they got rid of the Al Horford contract, and they fixed their roster construction. Like, that was our biggest complaint about the Sixers, was that the roster made absolutely no sense. Now you can see under Daryl Morey how the roster now makes a lot more sense. They have floor spacing, they have some defense. They're running Ben Simmons at the point, but they're surrounding him and Embiid with shooters.
Well, unless they put him at the power forward spot.
Well, who knows how they're gonna play this right now? And
Either way, he'll still play the same role.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's no such thing as like positions in today's NBA anymore. It's not really a thing.
Yeah, again, with more shooting and some defense, they can get back to being a lot better, especially with Embiid and Simmons. So they might not even have to trade one of the guys, as I still think they should, but at least now they don't have to necessarily trade one of them if these moves work out for them in the long run.
Again, there's a graphic out there of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, their point, how much they outscore opponents by. And in 2018, I think that was the team that they had Marco Bellinelli, JJ Redick, that team, Ersan Ilyasova, if I'm not mistaken. They're outscoring, their lineups with both guys together were outscoring opponents by like 18 almost points. And then after that, every year it dwindled down because the roster construction just got worse and worse and worse. So the notion of those guys not being able to coexist together, I think, is false. Obviously, they're not the most ideal pairing, but if you surround them with guys like Seth Curry, like Danny Green, or it would have been nice if they had JJ Redick, but if you surround guys like that around the big two that they have, they might be able to get back to that efficient basketball that they played a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it also depends on what type of system Doc Rivers is trying to run with these guys, so that's to be seen. But yeah, the Sixers did a solid job this offseason, especially under Daryl Morey's regime. So those were our 4 winners of the offseason. Let us know if you guys agree or disagree in the comments or on social media. But moving on into the losers of the offseason, and I think the first loser that we need to talk about is the Detroit Pistons. Because what the hell are they doing?
Bro, I don't know. Listen, there might not have been any... I think Detroit, if we're going to be honest, is the one clear loser from the offseason. The rest of the other teams, maybe they just didn't make any moves. Maybe they got marginally worse. But I think for us, Detroit was the one main loser that just, like, as you were talking about, like, you look at what they were doing, it makes no sense. Obviously, they got Rodney Hood... Rodney Magruder in the trade with when they got I don't know how to pronounce it, Zanon Musa. They got them in that deal, so a couple of role players. They got Sadiq Bey in the draft and the trade with was that the Houston Rockets trade?
I believe so, yeah.
Either way, 19th pick overall, Villanova forward. They got Sadiq Bey, so they got a nice rookie to come in for them. As you were talking about the Dwayne Dedmon deal, and the Zaire Smith. But moving on to the actual main moves that they made, DeLon Wright, trading for DeLon Wright. They got him, so he'll be reunited with Dwayne Casey again. Another, I can't even call him a young guard anymore because he's kind of.
He's like 26, 27 at this point.
He's like 27 around.
He came in as an older guard, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's definitely older at this point.
But then I think, and also Wayne Ellington, they just signed Wayne Ellington, so he'll also be back on the Pistons. He did play a couple years on the Pistons. a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But I think there are three main head-scratching signings that they made. And I think this is like the crux of where it kind of went wrong for the Pistons. Jeremy Grant, a 3-year, $60 million deal. Jahlil Okafor on a unreported 2-year deal. And then Mason Plumlee on a 3-year, $25 million deal. Now the reason, listen, these deals are not, I wouldn't say they're bad. Okay, they're not terrible. I wouldn't say they're great, but they're not terrible. The reason why these deals kind of made no sense is because of the fact that you had such high aspirations for them. I think even we had bigger aspirations for them and what they could do in the offseason. Number
Especially
one,
they were rebuilding. Like,
exactly.
You know.
Number one, Fred VanVleet. They were reported to be very interested in Fred VanVleet, Dwayne Casey reunion and whatnot. So they had enough space to go after Fred VanVleet. They had Christian Wood. We thought re-signing Christian Wood would be their biggest priority. Clearly not.
Yeah.
If not, if you didn't want to sign Christian Wood, you could go after a guy like Montrezl Harrell, who was in the mix with, New York, Charlotte, whatnot. So Montrezl Harrell could have been an option. The thing is, you overpaid for Jeremy Grant.
Which still doesn't make a ton of sense, especially on Jeremy Grant's perspective. It's like you could have gotten a similar type of deal.
No, Denver did give him the
Denver.
exact same deal. Denver reportedly gave him the exact same deal, but he pretty much wanted more PT.
But it's like, dude, like you're going from a winning organization to whatever the hell the Pistons are.
And my thing is, I hope he doesn't ask out and ask for a trade, because it's kind of like, bro, you were in an ideal situation with Denver. You would have gone the exact same amount of money.
And you put yourself in this situation.
Yeah, but now you're going to be in a losing situation. And you might not be as happy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's up to him. Maybe he likes getting, maybe he just wanted more opportunity. Okay, cool. But you also overpaid for Mason Plumlee. And you got Jahlil Okafor. Where you could have tried re-signing Christian Wood and Montrezl Harrell. You could have tried going after some other players like Fred VanVleet, some other people in this free agency. Instead, you settled for giving Mason Plumlee a 3-year, $25 million deal right out the gate from free agency, as if Mason Plumlee was some big priority for you. Like, he's a nice role player, don't get me wrong.
Why 3 years though? That's my question. You're a rebuilding franchise. You already have Blake Griffin on the roster. Not to mention you had Christian Wood. You could have re-signed him as a young player of the rebuilding team. Why did you go after 5 centers? That made no sense. Like, look at how many centers they have. They have Dwayne Dedmon now. They have Jahlil Okafor, Mason Plumlee. They have Blake Griffin, and I think they have someone else currently on the roster as well.
It's a very head scratching offseason.
There's no clear direction on what they're trying to do.
Exactly. Now, maybe Christian Wood just didn't want to stay in Detroit. He did sign a 3-year, $41 million deal to go to the Rockets. Again, I don't know how great that situation is going to be with their two superstars asking for a trade.
Yeah.
But then they also lost Luke Kennard in the Landry Shamet deal, which I guess, okay, fine. He is on an expiring contract. But that's where they got the Sadiq Bey.
Yeah, they got the 19th pick off that.
So they got Sadiq Bey. Okay, fine, cool. I mean, Luke Kennard's another guy you failed to be able to get to that next step.
But he showed potential. That's the thing. Even if you kept him, it wouldn't have been a bad idea to keep a guy like that around, as a rebuilding team.
Exactly. And then you you traded away Tony Snell. Again, expiring contract. Maybe you could have gone more. I don't know. I guess everyone's value has been killed in this offseason. But as you were pointing to, just a lack of, it seems like, direction in terms of what they want to do. Everyone, I think, had higher hopes for them in terms of the moves they could have pulled off, mainly Fred VanVleet re-signing Christian Wood. And in that sense, they didn't do any of that. They ended up trying to get Jeremy Grant for some reason. And then they paid Mason Plumlee $25 million right out the gate, as if, I guess, he was like one of their top 5 priorities or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
It's a head-scratching offseason, and it literally, it's the epitome of what Detroit has been over the last decade or so at this point. So yeah, the Detroit Pistons, clear loser of this offseason.
Longer than a decade, since pretty much Chauncey got traded. That's pretty much
okay. If you want to go back that far,
that's pretty much what they've been doing.
yeah. Moving on into the second loser of the off season. Now we'll use loser in air quotes because they did make some moves, but they could have done a lot better.
And they're still a title contender.
So we're talking about the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers, obviously, they had a lot of work to do after the embarrassing collapse of, that they had in the playoffs this past season. And with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard being on essentially 1-year deals at this point, you need to get your shit together to win the championship. The Clippers, they did make some additions in this offseason. They were able to re-sign Marcus Morris to a 4-year, $64 million deal.
Again, I don't know if that's a great move.
We saw what Marcus Morris did with the last big contract that he got. He forced his way out. So
you gave Marcus Morris $64 million for 4 seasons. Is that really a great deal for you? I don't know, because we've seen that Marcus Morris is. Ask a Celtics fan. I think that would be a more honest opinion of what they feel about Marcus Morris.
Yeah.
Marcus Morris, I think the idea of Marcus Morris outweighs what Marcus Morris actually is as a player. And don't get me wrong, he's still a good role player. But in terms of paying that guy $64 million for a 4-year deal, I don't know about that.
It's a little much. Moving on into the second edition, this one actually hurts a little bit for us. It hurts on a new level. So the Clippers were able to sign Serge Ibaka to a 2-year, $19 million contract.
They signed him for the mid-level.
They signed him for the mid-level. I mean, it stings for us because the Raptors could have offered him the exact same thing. Actually, they were offering him more. They were offering him 12 to 15 million for 1 year, but apparently Ibaka wanted that extra year.
I guess you also want to go to more of a title contender. I can't really fault him for that.
We can't fault him.
But damn, bro, just Toronto for the Clippers,
this?
bro, for the Clippers.
You saw that Kawhi made this mistake last year, and what happened to him? Just saying.
I mean, they did sign Serge Ibaka to replace Montrezl Harrell, which it can be argued that, in fact, that's even a better, upgrade over Montrezl Harrell.
I mean, now you can move Zubac to the bench and start Serge at center.
Well, unless they move Serge to the bench and keep starting Zubac, which might happen.
I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't personally do that. I think Serge is still a better player than Zubac.
Yeah, but in terms of bench role, might be better for him. And then, as we were talking about, they acquired Luke Kennard in the Landry Shamet deal, which pretty much their only aim for that was the flexibility aspect of it, because of the fact that Landry Shamet, first of all, is on a smaller deal, and it can be argued him and Luke Kennard are going to fill the same roles. Yeah, but the fact is that Luke Kennard is on an expiring deal, so I guess that gives them more flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, and then lastly, they re-signed Patrick Patterson because why not re-sign Patrick Patterson? I don't know why they re-signed Patrick Patterson. But, yeah, based on the additions, you would say that, okay, it's a decent offseason for the Clippers. It wasn't too spectacular, but it wasn't too poor. Now we get into why the Clippers, it was a poor offseason. First of all, they let Montrezl Harrell go. That was already a big loss because you could have kept him onto your team, and he left you. He left you because you didn't show that you wanted to re-sign the guy. You also, let go of JaMychal Green. Again, another, piece on your team, another depth piece.
He was one of the best players for the Clippers,
and he signed
especially in the playoffs. And he signed for pretty much $7.5 million per year to Denver. So it was a 2-year, $15 million deal.
Denver doesn't mind that. They got to replace
Jeremy
Grant with JaMychal Green. So a solid pickup for them. And then obviously they did lose out on Landry Shamet, which, again, Shamet is right now the better player than Luke Kennard, although they do play a very similar style. Breaking news. Sacramento signing Hassan Whiteside.
So he's going back to Sacramento.
He's going back to Sacramento. Just literally happened.
Okay move for them.
I mean,
but in terms of why I think this was not the greatest offseason for them, again, they didn't have a terrible offseason like the Pistons, right? There was no clear-cut losers in this offseason except for the Pistons, I think. But in terms of why the Clippers were not, did not have a successful offseason, I would say, first of all, they didn't get a point guard. They were interested in Rajon Rondo, which would have been a big pickup for them. They needed that point guard presence on the team to complement Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. They didn't get their point guard. They lost 2 valuable bigs in JaMychal Green and Montrezl Harrell. So that's not great. And then as you were talking about before, they pretty much have 1 year left to make sure they win. They have to win a championship. And then I think even beyond that, what makes this offseason for them hurt even more is because of the fact that their rival had a great offseason, right? Down the
And
hall.
they just won the championship.
And they just got your 6th man of the year.
Like, at the end of the day, the best way I can say this is that the Clippers are in a very shitty situation right now as far as they got to win now. They don't really have assets. They don't have money. And they're letting guys go that they needed to retain in order to compete with a team like the Lakers. Like, apparently Chris Paul was interested in coming back to the Clippers. The problem is the Clippers didn't have enough assets to trade for Chris Paul because they traded away all their assets to the Thunder to acquire Paul George.
Yep.
So
they got the worst Paul.
yeah, they did get the worst Paul.
But yeah, like the Clippers, I think are in that situation of what the Raptors were in 2 years ago, where they have to win right now, but it's probably even worse considering they're in LA.
Well, no, not even that. The fact is the Raptors still had flexibility moving forward. They still had picks and assets that they can still move. The Clippers don't have any of that. Like, they don't have any of that.
They went all in on a championship. You got to respect the fact that they're willing to gamble to try to win that championship, and they're trying to go all in for it. But if you don't get it done, then it's all for nothing, right?
And you're still going to be the laughingstock. So,
you're still going to be that little brother down the hallway.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's basically it, man. So, yeah, the Clippers and the Pistons, the two losers of this offseason. Let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree with those two picks?
I think we definitely, also, side note, we probably definitely could have had other people, other teams in the winners column as well as the losers column. But I think in terms of, for the sake of not just going over every single thing from the offseason, that was pretty much what we cut it down to.
Yeah, but we will give you guys some honorable free agent signings that we thought we'd like to mention and give our thoughts on. The first couple that we want to talk about are the two signings that the Raptors made. Obviously, being Raptor fans, we got to talk about them first. The Raptors, first of all, re-signed Fred VanVleet to a 4-year, $85 million deal. I mean, this was expected. For us, that was our main priority heading into this offseason, with re-signing Fred. I think it was a good number, about $21 million per year.
Especially they need to get this deal done considering they lost Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol.
Yeah.
Speaking of losing Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol, they replaced them with Aaron Baines, who signed to a $14 million contract.
For 2 years?
For 2 years. Very good pickup. I really, obviously Aaron Baines is a very good player. Now, would I have liked him off the bench to, say back up Serge Ibaka?
Absolutely.
That would have been ideal.
If we were to do that, dude, I would have loved it. I think the Raptors would have been in the winners bracket, honestly. But Aaron, it sucks that we lost out on Ibaka, but Aaron Baines isn't a bad pickup. He's cost controlled. He still gives the Raptors the flexibility for next offseason, which is what they prioritized by not signing Serge and Mark to long-term deals. So again, the Raptors are going to take a bit of a step back this upcoming season, which kind of sucks for us because these past couple of years have been insanely great for us as far as success. But if that means signing Giannis next year,
yeah. So mainly they did these moves to keep their cap flexibility open. They also did sign Alex Len to be Aaron Baines' backup. Pretty much, they re-signed Chris Boucher on a 2-year, $13 million deal. They signed DeAndre Bembry on a 2-year, $4 million deal. So overall, this was more about keeping the cap flexibility open for next offseason. But yeah, it does suck for us considering these past X amount of years have been great, successful years. But we'll still make the playoffs. Yeah, we're probably gonna take a step back.
We'll still make the playoffs, but I just feel like we'll be more of a fifth seed rather than a top 3 seed in the East. Moving on into another team that got better this offseason.
I wouldn't say better, but they at least...
Well, they added a piece that the Raptors probably could have added, but
yeah. And
it kind of sucks that they got him. It's the Celtics. They signed Tristan Thompson to a 2-year, $19 million deal. Again, Tristan Thompson signed for the mid-level. And the Celtics also signed Jeff Teague to a 1-year deal. So yeah, I mean, Tristan Thompson, we were actually afraid of this, that Tristan Thompson would end up on a team like the Celtics.
I think he almost ended up on there in the trade deadline last season.
I mean, again, he gives them rebounding, he gives size, he gives defense.
A lob threat.
And for a cheap deal like that, it's a pretty good acquisition for the Boston Celtics.
They also, they also signed Jeff Teague to be their backup point guard, which is probably an upgrade over Brad Wanamaker, who went to the Golden State Warriors. Um, Ideally, you would look at these moves and say that the Celtics definitely improved in the offseason. But moving on to our next move, the reason why they might not have improved on the offseason and just maybe stayed the same or gotten a little bit worse is because of the fact that Gordon Hayward left them. So he declined his player option and ended up signing a 4-year, $120 million deal with the Hornets. Shout out Gordon Hayward's agent, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, again, it's a bit of a questionable move from Gordon Hayward's perspective in the sense that like he was in a winning situation with Boston, and he had a good, nice remaining contract left, like $34 million player option. I mean, you could have taken that money and still been in a winning situation. But I think he wanted more long term security, especially after he's had a scary injury,
yeah,
in his past. So
he's been very injured for the past pretty much since he got to Boston.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for him to take that security over, that uncertainty, especially in the next offseason where there's a lot of other big free agents. So it would probably diminish his value even more in that next offseason. But hey, like you can't fault the guy for taking a $120 million deal.
It's just with the Charlotte. With Charlotte, that's my only thing. I'm like, really? You went to Charlotte?
Speaking of which,
yeah.
who does anybody know what Mitch Kupchak is doing? I don't know.
I mean, we can call Michael Jordan, but I don't think he'll know either. I think he's too busy playing golf. Charlotte's people have hyped up Charlotte a lot after the draft, drafting LaMelo Ball, but are they really that much better?
Like they're a fun team.
Their salary still sucks.
They'll be a fun team to watch. I think. Maybe I don't know. Maybe
who knows? Stink. I mean.
But yeah, like Mitch Kupchak I think, had a rough couple of years, pretty much since his Luol Deng and Timothy Mozgov signings.
God, those are horrible. Moving on into the next notable signing, the Phoenix Suns made a couple of signings. First of all, they signed Jay Crowder to a 3-year, $30 million deal. I thought this was a solid pickup, especially after acquiring Chris Paul, another veteran leader in the locker room. Especially if the Suns are trying to make a playoff push, getting a guy like Jay Crowder is a great pickup. But personally, I thought he was gonna go back to Miami.
Well, it was about the fact that I don't think Miami had enough money to sign him, especially on the years that he wanted. He got a longer deal from the Phoenix Suns. But still, it's a great pickup for them.
Yeah.
He fills that 3-and-D spot. He can maybe back up, Mikal Bridges, unless they want to start him for now and then help move Mikal Bridges along slowly. In
a mentorship role, like he can mentor Mikal Bridges.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a solid pickup for the Phoenix Suns. And again, it's not really expensive either. Another signing the Suns made was signing Langston Galloway, our guy for every single offseason outlook. But here's the thing. We want to see Langston Galloway in a new situation. Was Phoenix my ideal pick? No, it was not, but I think he'll be solid in Phoenix. I think it's a good pick.
Floor spacer. And then they also re-signed Javon Carter and Dario Saric. So Dario Saric was re-signed on a 3-year, $27 million deal. I think Javon Carter, they haven't announced the details for that contract yet. So either way, they retained two guys that were important parts for them off the bench. And, they keep that core going. And they just keep... They're trying to take that next step with the Chris Paul deals and with...
They're trying to make a playoff push. That's what they're trying to do.
Exactly.
And these players will definitely help them do that. The next signing that we want to talk about is the Wizards re-signing Davis Bertans to a 5-year, $80 million deal. Now, obviously, the Wizards were expected to re-sign Bertans, and that was the whole reason why Davis Bertans didn't even play in the bubble. He's like, yo, I'm not trying to get injured. I'm not trying to risk my money. And he got paid. He got paid handsomely for his services. For the Wizards, I mean, it's a solid pickup for the Wizards. Now, the Wizards have other issues that they need to solve. But I'm excited to see, the Wizards, especially with John Wall returning.
Yeah, I mean, they did with Davis Bertans, they retain one of the best shooters in the league and a guy that vastly improves your offense.
Yeah.
So, again, they do have a lot of other issues, but we saw last season that offense wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
And Davis Bertans is a huge reason why. And
the Spurs
I was just going to say that. The Spurs messed up trying to go for Marcus Morris, who ended up spurning them
Yeah,
to go to the Knicks.
Don't go for the Morris twins. Go for the European.
Yeah.
He does great. That's the Spurs. That's how they get their success, man. They get the Europeans.
Or South Americans.
Yeah, or just tank and get Tim Duncan first overall. That helps too.
Well, they didn't tank. David Robertson got injured.
No, they tanked for Tim Duncan. Finally, the last signing. It's not a major signing, but it's a notable one just based on the fact that it's nice to see this guy back in the league. The Rockets signed DeMarcus Cousins to a 1-year deal. Now, DeMarcus Cousins has probably the worst 2-year stretch out of any player. 3-year stretch, yeah. Based off injuries, signing with contenders, getting cut.
The fact is that this guy could have gone a max contract with after his New Orleans season ended.
Yeah.
But then he got injured, and then he just kept getting injured over and over and over again. Yeah. And he has not been able to stay on the floor. And you saw what value he can still provide in the finals with Golden State. We saw his productivity even in limited minutes.
And that wasn't even a fully healthy DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
A DeMarcus Cousins at 75%, I'd have to guess.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, lower. It's nice to see him back in the league and I see him with another contract. So hopefully he can stay healthy and actually showcase that he's still a solid player in this league.
It's a low risk, high reward thing for the Rockets.
Yeah. And finally, the last thing we want to cover in this episode, we want to break down some of the extensions that are given out to some of the players coming off rookie deals. There was a lot of notable players that got handsomely paid for their services. First one we want to talk
rightfully so.
Yeah, rightfully so. First one we're going to talk about is Brandon Ingram getting a 5-year, $158 million extension to stay with the Pelicans. Ingram had an all-star season. Although he started off with slow development at the beginning of his career, he's clearly showed that he has potential and he can be a solid player. When an organization takes time to develop a player.
Well, I mean, he's an all-star now.
He's an all-star. He earned this money, so he's definitely a player that has deserved this contract extension from the Pelicans. Another player who really earned his contract extension is Bam Adebayo, signing a 5-year, $163 million extension with the Miami Heat. Again, Bam was a major reason why the Heat were able to go to the NBA Finals this past season. He was all defensive second team member. Bam is just one of those jack of all trades type of big now. He's the type of big that every team kind of wants now.
I was just going to say that he's kind of become one of those prototypical centers in today's league.
Yeah.
Where he can, play defense from, pretty much switch out onto the perimeter, anchor the paint on the defensive end, and on the other end, he's a great passer. Can finish at the rim. He does need to work on his jumper. But he's
still working on the jumper, and he still has room to improve in that regard. So again, the Heat, no brainer. They should lock up this guy long term. The next no-brainer contract is the Celtics locking up Jason Tatum to a 5-year, $195 million
Well,
extension.
It's technically $165 million, but then it can go up to $195 million.
Yeah, but I mean, no-brainer. Jason Tatum has been probably, maybe a top 10, top 15 player in the league, hands down.
Definitely a top 15 player in the league, I think, especially during the second half of the season. After the All-Star break, he came out.
And you saw him in the playoffs, man.
Yeah, bro. Especially after the All-Star break, this guy was insane, man. You saw how creative a player he is in terms of all three scoring levels. This guy he really looked like a veteran guy that just knew exactly what he was doing on the court at all times.
And we gave him a lot of shit after, I think, was it last season or the year before?
Second season, yeah.
Yeah, going off that whole Kobe thing, no mid-range, no three-pointers, but...
Yeah, just shooting long twos. But Jason Tatum, man, he's become an insane.
It sucks that he's a Celtic, man.
Yeah, it sucks, and especially the fact that he took that leap on the defensive end as well, where he's become a great defender on that side of the ball as well. The Celtics have a superstar in the making.
What a trade, man, by Danny Ainge to get this guy.
Yeah.
Moving on to that's a finesse. Moving on to the next extension, the Utah Jazz signed Donovan Mitchell to the expected 5-year, $163 million extension. Similar. It's the same thing as Jason Tatum. It could be 195 with bonuses. Again, we discussed this. This was gonna happen basically from the end of the playoff run. They said, we're locking this guy in.
Well, I mean, even from pretty much, you could see it happening probably from his rookie season. that you could see this in the works.
He
but
was
yeah,
a steal of a pick at like what the 13th pick in the draft, a trade from the Denver Nuggets. Mitchell's been fantastic. He's a great player, great overall player. He's getting better. You saw him this past year in the playoffs, the amazing run he went on. Yeah, no brainer for the Jazz to keep this guy around long term. And finally, this is probably the most. I mean,
the more interesting one, but I think it makes sense from their point of view
Yeah,
too.
the
Like, probably a
Sacram-
no-brainer for them.
Yeah, the Sacramento Kings lock up De'Aaron Fox to a 5-year, $163 million extension. Now again, you could argue, does De'Aaron Fox has he done enough to warrant that big of an extension? Um, I mean, yes and no. He's a solid player. He still has room to improve, especially as a shooter, and as a creator. But you can't deny he has talent. He can score. He can get to the rim. He's one of the fastest players in the league. And for a Kings team that honestly needs some sort of stability,
Yeah.
re-signing a player like that is obviously is a solid move.
Again, is he better than any of the other players on this list? No, he's not. But he's probably like one tiny tier under them. And it can be argued that he has a chance. He had a chance maybe last year to make the All-Star team. If he continues on the progression that he is, he'll probably see a couple of All-Star games. And as you were talking about, he is very much needed for a Sacramento team that has lacked any sort of stability for the past 20 years.
Yeah. So those were some of the extensions that were given out to some players coming off their rookie deals. Definitely let us know what you guys think. Do you guys agree or disagree with it? But with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various podcasting platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio. Basically, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us with the Up and Under Podcast. Also, follow the show on social media, Twitter and Instagram at @UpNUnderPodcast, Facebook.com/UpAndUnderPodcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news as they occur. Also, check out our website, UpAndUnderPodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. If you want to read blog posts about every episode, you can do so there. And yeah, man, now we're going to get into the regular season. Things are going to be picking up now.
Predictions,
man. They're coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. But with that concludes this week's episode, and we'll see you guys all in the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.